They're faster than a speeding dragon, able to leap tall trolls in a single bound, stronger than a very big rock. Ready to eliminate evil at every turn, they're the most colorful crime fighters around.
Gummies!
That's right, the Gummy Bears, the juiciest defenders of justice to ever pounce on the bad guys.
All right, let's do our stuff. Now that's what I call hardened criminals.
Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears.
The small screen, the telly, the boob tube, in a word, television. Stories once thought doomed to fail on the big screens of Hollywood saw new life because of its conception. And in the late 80s, newly appointed CEO of the Walt Disney Company, one Michael Eisner, would expand Disney's reach into the medium through a road once thought economically impossible. Television animation. Years later, one man, a man doing a discount Rod Serling, a man with admittedly way too much time on his hands, has embarked on a quest to watch and review them all. So join us now, shall you, as you are now entering a new dimension. A dimension whose boundaries are that only of your own imagination. A dimension we like to call the Disney TVA Files. Well, greetings, salutations, and overall, how the hell are you all doing out there in internet land? Welcome to the inaugural episode of my brand new podcast, the Disney TVA Files. Now, what is the Disney TVA Files? Well, as kind of said in the opener, this is the show where I, your humble, ugly host, will attempt to watch and review at least one episode from the entire back catalog of Disney television animation shows, that's where TVA comes in, provided they are on the Disney Plus streaming service at the time of recording, with the end game of determining whether these shows deserve to stay on Disney Plus or if they should go back to the Disney Vault. Now, today, since we're doing the first episode of my first podcast, I figured we would keep the theme of first going by looking at the first episode of the first ever Disney television animation show. What do you mean it's not? It's the first one they ever did. Oh, fine. I guess we'll go with the second one. Way to ruin my theme. Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears. Now, this show aired originally on Saturday mornings on NBC from 1985 to 1989. At that point, it moved to ABC, no, Disney didn't own this yet, in the fall of 1989, where apparently it was aired as part of a Gummy Bears Winnie the Pooh hour.
Got something special inside and you knew it's the Gummy Bears and Winnie the Pooh. Brave and courageous and lovable too. It's the Gummy Bears and Winnie the Pooh. It's so sad of fun. Winnie and the Gummy holding the one. Sad of fun. It's unique time to Disney Bears. We want you to share it. The Gummy Bears and Winnie the Pooh.
Around this same time is also when the series became part of the legendary Disney afternoon cartoon block, the Disney Afternoon. In total, there were 6 seasons totaling 95 episodes, which I believe makes it one of the longest runs in Disney TVA history. And I want to remind you, this is a show based around a candy. Which actually, speaking of that, let's just quickly dive into the absolute ridiculous origins of this show. Now, Disney had for a while rejected the notion of doing cartoons on television, thinking it was basically financially impossible to recoup, I guess, the costs. But when new CEO Michael Eisner came into play, he basically tore those walls down and said, guys, there's a market here, we're gonna do this. And when potential ideas for shows were passed around and shown off, Michael Eisner didn't like any of them, and he especially did not like the idea of putting Mickey Mouse on TV. Kind of ironic considering how many Mickey Mouse shows have they done? He instead pitched the idea around gummy bear candies because he had recently had an interaction with his son, and I guess he just thought that was an interesting concept. This whole thing has been summed up and joked around for many years, most notably, in my opinion, by Escape from Walt Disney host Tony Goldmark, where he kind of did this joke.
You know, my kid really likes those gummy bear candies. Could you make a show about that?
Now, a couple of weird factoids about this show is that apparently in 1993, there was an Australian psychology experiment where they gathered kids who watched Adventures of the Gummi Bears and kids who watched something a little bit more violent, like Voltron. And they gave them toys for each of these shows, and they noticed the behavior of the kids who had the Voltron toys apparently acted and played more violently than those who played and watched the Gummi Bears, which that is not exactly a strict apples-to-apples comparison. You're comparing an action show to something a little bit more story-driven. I don't know why psychologists thought that was an equal comparison. That would be like doing the same thing with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Care Bears, so good on you, psychologists. One other weird factoid about this show, and just really, I guess, shows how popular it was, the whole Disney Afternoon eventually got a part of Disneyland itself, called Disney Afternoon Avenue, and I believe where it once was is now where Toontown is. And this was kind of cheap. It was like you could meet Baloo, there was a stage show, but one of the things they did with this was they rethemed the motorboat cruise in Fantasyland, I believe, to now be the motorboat cruise to Gummy Glen. And this has the distinction of, at least in my opinion, being the cheapest fucking overlay in Disneyland history. Because realistically, all they did was, along the route of the existing ride, they just put, and I can't stress this enough, I am not making this up, plywood cardboard cutouts of the characters from the show, supposedly making gummy berry juice. Again, there's not really a lot of footage of this existing, along the path of the ride. No animatronics, not even 3D static figures. 2D plywood cutouts. The same thing you would see, walking around your neighborhood during Christmas time, with people putting that stuff on their lawn of the Grinch and Frosty and what have you. So again, Disney, billion-dollar company, plywood. But enough of just talking about factoids and the history of the show. What about the show itself? Well, we'll be back in a few seconds for you, for me, probably a half hour, as we watch the first episode of Disney's Adventures of the Gummi Bears, A New Beginning, right here on the Disney TVA Files. Alright, so I just got done watching Disney's Adventures of the Gummi Bears, Season 1, Episode 1, A New Beginning. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised. This was actually kind of decent. Now, the reason why I say it was surprising to me is because, and I forgot to mention this before I started the episode, I have actually never seen this show. I'd only seen bits and pieces of it here and there, most notably in, like 'em or not, Doug Walker's Disney Afternoon video. And that was really my only exposure to the show. But now, after having seen it, again, I think it's very, very charming. Again, something definitely for little kids, but there are some things that I think adults would like about it. One of the first things I just want to get out of the way, because I think everybody knows this about this show, whether they've even seen it or not, is the theme song to this show slaps. This theme song kicks ass. It really, I think, sort of gears you up for an adventure with these bears, which again, this is based around a candy, so the fact that it even has a good theme song, a theme song that probably is better than it has any right to be, shows that how much Disney was willing to sort of put all their money into this. And actually, yeah, and just going off of that, some of the voice actors on this show, are voice acting legends. I saw it in the credits, June Foray, who I think plays the sort of grandmother bear.
Truffy Gummy, you have the manners of a billy goat.
But even going further than that, like some of the voices that I recognize, the main purple one, whose name is escaping me right now, is voiced by Paul Winchell, who of course voiced Tigger.
Oh no, of course not, Cubby. That's just a story.
You have the voice of Garfield.
I can do it, Grammy. I can do it.
As another one of the bears. So there's some high caliber voice acting talent on display in this show. There are also a lot of voices from the other faction, the sort of Duke and Ogre side. One of the... let me just say this. The Duke has two sort of main ogres. One, who I'm not going to hold this against the show because the show wasn't even a thing yet. One, I think, is the orange one. Kind of sounds like Patrick from SpongeBob. I don't know if it is Bill Fagerbaki.
Pardon your nastiness. Catapult ready for test.
But then he has kind of like a little smaller one who... I'm just going to say it. He sounds like Smee.
Yes, sire.
You know, that's not the only Peter Pan sort of, I guess, analogy that I can even use with this show, which I'll get into in a little bit. Because even the Duke himself kind of sounds a little bit like Captain Hook.
What's the matter with you? I might have been hurt.
Crossed with Skeletor from He-Man. In fact, I'll just go into this right now. So the Gummy Bears have this sort of tree hideout. It's where they sort of hang. I guess it's where their town is. They say it's where the ancient Gummies, sort of, they made it, and now I guess they're just occupying. It's kind of unclear. Or maybe I just missed it. But first off, they have this sort of log flume phoenix, like, bird thing ride that they take. And I'm just gonna say this. When Kevin is on this ride, he basically reminds me of when I was in Disney recently and got on Space Mountain. Like, all of his reactions, the way he's like, can we turn this thing around? Like, that is me. That is me on that ride. I connected to that on a personal level. Although I'm not quite sure how they got branded seatbelt buckles like the medallions, but again, that's beside the point. Which, since I'm on the subject of Kevin, and again, I'm sorry if this is kind of all over the place, but I'm just gonna say this. Kevin, my friend, you're kind of an idiot. And I'll say what I mean, because there's two moments in this episode where he has dumb blonde idiot moments. Like, that's all I can really describe it as. One such is where he gets trapped by the ogres, and he has his foot in this sort of like cuff thing. And the Gummy Bear's like, we gotta save him. Okay, I'm gonna make Gruffy invisible, and then you go give him the juice, and he'll drink it and he'll escape. So, first off, the invisibility doesn't even last the entire length of the walk. He reappears kind of within a couple seconds. But to add insult to injury, then Kevin decides to see Gruffy and say, oh, hey, Gruffy, you came to save me, in front of like 3 or 4 ogre guards. And I'm like, dude, do you want to be rescued? Like, if I was Gruffy, I'd just be like, yeah, okay, bye. And then later on in the final battle, when the ogres and the Duke are fighting the Gummy Bears and Kevin over the bottle of gummy berry juice that was for Kevin, he finally gets it. Kevin finally holds it, and he's about to drink it, and he uncorks it, but apparently the Duke was, like, right next to him, and the Duke's like, okay, thank you. Really? Like, really, my dude? Do you not have any peripheral vision? And that's not the only time where a character does something that is kind of weird, because then you have, within the first 5 minutes, the princess of the castle that they're trying to save, Kala, who I guess has a crush on Kevin, or I guess it's kind of mutual, they both have a crush on each other. When you first introduce her, she's walking around the castle and then just decides to jump off into a bale of hay, but before you see the hay, you just see her jump off the castle in basically a suicide jump. So I was kind of taken aback by that. That hay must have been, like, very thick to be able to support a landing from that height. And one more thing about Kala before we continue. Maybe it's just me, and, like, maybe other people this isn't a problem, but for me, the model of Kala, who kind of looks like the Good Times version of Belle, the voice actor for her, like, she sounds older than, one, I would argue, Kevin, and 2, it looks older than the model itself. Now again, this might not be an issue for everybody, but for me it took a couple minutes to get used to the voice, because it sounded like a much older woman than I think the model of the character was trying to convey. Now, basically, the the whole episode kind of plays into prejudices and what's real, what's not. These are legends, these are fairy tales of, the gummy bears. And sort of the episode is about the forming of this bond between the gummy bear troop and Kevin, to the point where the episode kind of ends on sort of a promise that he made to never reveal that they are real. I would be interested to see if he does eventually show other people the gummy bears and if they take the same oath. But clearly for the show overall, I think what's going to be the sort of deus ex machina, and the thing that all the characters are trying to either protect or get, is this gummy berry juice. Which, I'm just gonna be real, the gummy bears are essentially protecting a drug. Because if it affects humans the same way or in similar ways that it does the gummy bears, that means humans would get bouncy bottoms, they become super strong and can lift giant boulders over their head and toss them into a castle, to the point where, physics be damned, the castle breaks from a single boulder as if it's like made of paper. And actually, speaking of the physics in this show being completely all over the place, towards the end, when the Duke drinks the gummy berry juice, he throws the first rock, they do the similar thing with Kevin, where it wears off, and what he's holding eventually tries to crush him. Then he's in the catapult. I guess they put him in the catapult. They throw him at the castle. He slides along the floor into a room with a fireplace. And apparently, and I don't know how this would even work in cartoon physics, it's enough momentum from the catapult to launch him straight out of the fireplace like a rocket, like a firework. How did that just happen? Even in cartoon logic, how did that just happen? So again, final thoughts on this show before I get into my verdict of if it should stay on Disney Plus or go into the Disney Vault. Overall, I would say Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears is, like I said in the beginning, it's perfectly fine. It's a charming show. It has decent comedy. I thought a lot of the Duke's jokes were actually quite funny. Visually, I think the show looks very nice. It is an interesting world that I think you would want to explore. Even if there are certain characters that look like things that would later come. Like, the ogres kind of look like Brooklyn from Gargoyles, but obviously that couldn't be because the Gargoyles would come later. So I would honestly want to know if the Gargoyles designers were influenced by the Gummy Bears in any way, shape, or form. But again, visually it looks very nice. Out of the Gummy Bears, I would say Zumi, which is the one voiced by Tigger, Paul Winchell, is probably my favorite looking one out of all of them. And the Gummy Bears themselves, I think, are very nice, warm, inviting characters. One, because of the way they are designed, and two, because of their voice acting. I think that does a lot of the heavy lifting in sort of making you like these characters almost immediately. But again, the main target demographic for this show, I do believe, are little kids. I could definitely see this airing still on something like Disney Junior. But again, adults will find stuff to like in this show, I think anyway, because it has that very classic Disney feel. So overall, is Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears going on Disney Plus or staying in the Disney Vault? Since I don't want to be a fence sitter, and I will never allow a fence sitter on this show, I will say Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears is, at least from the first episode, staying on Disney Plus. I liked what I saw. I'd be very interested to see where this goes. And again, I can see why it lasted for as long as it did. Because again, for little kids, I think they would definitely eat this show up. And that's it for my thoughts on Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears, but don't go anywhere, because right now we are going to be picking the episode for next time, where we will be looking at the original DuckTales series. So right now, I'm looking at a random number generator, and we're going to do this for both the season and for the episode. So, random number generator for the season is Season 4, the final season. As for the number of the episode, the random number for the episode is Episode 2, which makes the final result for next time on this show DuckTales Season 4, Episode 2, Attack of the Metal Mites, which I'm looking forward to watching some of DuckTales, because again, I really enjoyed the reboot series to DuckTales, so again, now I kind of want to see where, the roots of the show are. Now, before we go, I just want to remind you, this is a podcast, so if you would be so kind, if you enjoyed the show, to leave us a rating, leave us a review, leave a comment, let us know how you like the show, what we could do differently, what you want to stay the same. It really helps out the show a lot to grow and evolve and become the show that you all want it to be, in addition to what I want it to be. If you're listening to this on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe, and again, leave a comment, let us know what you liked about it. And until next time, this is James, signing off from the Disney TVA Files.